The tabletop takeaway.
Game mechanics on display.
3 designers share the stage.
Pick a genre and we'll play.
The tabletop takeaway.
Welcome back to the Tabletop Takeaway. I'm Trevor Muller-Hagel.
I'm Ananda Gunaratne.
And I'm Charlie McCarran.
And today we are continuing our exploration of real-time games with Magic Maze. Magic Maze is a 1 to 8 player game that sows chaos and confusion by you controlling a group of adventurers who are seemingly impoverished, and they are trying to get out of this magical mall with their loot that they really wanted to have to start their adventuring careers. I don't know if I'm putting a lot of extra story that doesn't need to be there, but you know what? That's all right.
I think that's pretty accurate.
I'm looking at the box cover right now, and all of them look like they're in rags and like really poor clothing, and they are literally stealing the items from the mall. Mm-hmm. And the elf is in the background with their bow, jumping for joy because they got out. So what you're trying to do is there's kind of 2 phases to the game. There is getting to the store with all of your characters, and then escaping from the mall with your items. The real-time aspect is that no one is an individual character in the game. So you all have a thing that you can do with manipulating the characters around. So all 4 characters are always on the board no matter how many players you have. And you're trying to move them through square tiles that have spaces on them. And each one can explore through different gates, so to speak. And so different players can evoke the exploration where it has to align with the correct character. So let's say you have the barbarian. The barbarian can only go through yellow gates and explore yellow gates, but only the person who is the gate person can actually reveal the new tile. And so you have multiple layers of things you're paying attention to. And sometimes you can all focus on one character and just get that one character to move around and get to the right spot and do things. But the thing that's interesting is that you can only really... You can move the character, but you can't communicate. So you can't actually talk to each other until you hit certain benchmarks of the game, which is where you are also timed. So at that time, you flip over the sand timer, and then you can talk, but time is still running out. So you have to be really careful about how you manage your time, manage your resources, so on and so forth. I won't go into too much more detail. There are a few other elements of the game as well, but that's kind of the core thing. Players have control over like up, down, left, right, or north, south, east, west. And then also warping characters across the mall. And then also exploring new tiles. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Kind of the rough rundown?
Yeah, and like, so you can visualize it too. Each player has their little action card in front of them that shows like, oh, I'm moving north only. Yep. And someone else is moving west and south, and someone else is moving east. But
and can also teleport people.
Teleporting or something. Yeah. So
and there's escalators too, which could be like little shortcuts, but only if that person who is the escalator person sees it and moves them there.
There's one escalator person.
And there's one way to communicate. There's a big red pawn that you can put in front of someone to tell them like, hey, I want you to do something.
Not what you want them to do.
Not what you want them to do, just something. That you want them to do something. Which gives you like, oh my God, what do you want me to do right now? I was looking at the board and I swear there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game. I don't think I've played any other game quite like it.
I guess it reminds me a little bit of Conspiracy, which is an old... I'm not talking about the social deduction game. I'm talking about I think it has a different name now, but there's this game called Conspiracy where you're a bunch of spies, except you're not actually a spy, you're a spy agency, and you can control any of the 8 spies on the board.
Oh, okay.
But that game was turn-based and competitive, whereas this game is real-time and cooperative.
Right.
So like in Conspiracy, the thing was you can move a spy, but someone else can challenge your movement of that spy, and then if they paid the spy more money, then you don't get to make the move. Whereas here, we're all cooperating, and it's each of us has our own move that we can do, and you don't challenge each other. It's more you have to, make sure you complement the other's move. So it's kind of the opposite of Conspiracy, but it is the same thing where you're sharing control over a set of characters.
I'm gonna do a weird comparison of this game to The Mind, where you actually feel like you have to be in sync together to understand where you're trying to go and why you're trying to get there. Because you have a common objective, but you don't necessarily know what the next step that person really wants you to get to. unless there's a very clear, like, oh, you're trying to get to that path so that person can unlock that area so we can get into this new room. It's a little interesting because you're like trying to communicate without communicating until you can get to those different benchmarks
Yeah.
or landmarks.
And the Mind was a contender for this.
It was a
series,
contender,
but,
for sure.
We didn't. Just a real quick rundown. You're in real time placing number cards out, and you're trying to go from 1 to 100 without like screwing up what's in your hand. And so you're
Playing
thinking
all
like,
the cards every player has.
yeah, and if your number is coming up soon, you'll want to play quickly. But if you have numbers that are, it's a little while till we get to 90 something. So
Right.
you're like holding back in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So you have this like information that that other people don't. Where this one is actually a perfect information game for the players who are playing. You all see the same information at least. And then the new tiles that are revealed are randomized. And they have a lot of different scenarios, but the scenarios don't create like static mazes to go through. They're all dynamic and they all are new mazes for you to kind of play around with and figure out the puzzle for that unique maze, which is, I think, is a fun choice for something like this, especially with how fast it plays. We played 4 or 5 games? Somewhere around there?
Yeah, I think we played 4 games.
Yeah, we played a few of the intro scenarios. There's technically 7 intro scenarios, but we kind of clumped some of them together just so we could get a good feel for the game. But yeah, I really like how it creates a little bit of difference for each character as well, where like the elfin is like a ranger,
right?
And they can give you a benefit of being able to talk when they explore in a new room, versus like the dwarf who is short and can go through little shortcuts that other people can't go through. And then the mage wizard character can reveal additional tiles by going onto this mystic slot.
And then the barbarian can smash the security cameras.
Right, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think for me, like the most fun is kind of when we're all looking around and like the split attention between, should we be working on this person, or we can all work on this at the same time. And
where's the timer at? Is the timer okay? Timer's good.
Yep.
Okay, but we want to have someone near something that will reset the timer. Okay,
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a satisfying thing to only be in charge of one direction.
Yeah.
And then like we keep passing back and forth. So I move left, Ananda moves up, Trevor moves right.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, that distribution of like there's this thing that only you can do, and you need to do it if we're going to win.
Yeah.
That feels really good.
You can't be checked out.
Yeah.
And then if you do like suddenly lose track of what's happening, it's like, oh God, well I can't move anything. I need someone to move something. But how do I wait, what are we trying to do? Oh God, where are we going to go? Like
where are we even going?
Yeah.
We got to a point where we moved someone farther away from where we're trying to get them just because we could move them, I think.
Yeah.
It was just like, but then you could be able to teleport people. It's like, okay, no, let's just move him to this other spot and do something new here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's asymmetry, and it's asymmetry in maybe the strongest example we've seen so far, because like a game like Spirit Island is asymmetrical, but any spirit can really do anything that needs to be done
in some way or another.
Yeah. But Root is heavily asymmetric, but each faction can do more or less the same things.
Sure.
Just with different focuses. But in this game, not only can we do different things, but we are absolutely vital to success,
to the mechanism.
You cannot win without any of the individual abilities, and that just feels really good.
Yeah, because you have to do something, and maybe you see something someone else doesn't, and so you can kind of remind them, but you can't do it yourself.
Yeah, you're a necessary cog in the mission.
Yeah.
It actually reminds me a little bit of our discussion of Just One in a way, because I think back in Just One, we were talking about how you feel like you need to rely on your allies.
Sure.
Because your word alone isn't going to be enough.
Oh, yeah,
and it's a similar thing here. You feel like, okay, I have this thing that I can do, and they're relying on me, and I can rely on them as well.
Oh,
and
sure.
I have to rely on them. And it's the same sort of really powerful team spirit.
Yeah.
Because you have to trust each other.
Well, yeah, and you have to effectively do a mind meld with each other and understand, like, work together as a cohesive machine.
Yeah.
The other twist is that after you get through all of the introductory stages, you are rotating the roles around. So you don't stay with your role for the entire game,
Right.
which really kind of pushes your flexibility a little bit. And I really like
Yeah.
that.
Although, on the other hand, one potential downside of that is, we've already talked a little bit how in real-time games, one challenge is if players forget the rules and accidentally cheat.
Oh, sure.
And I feel like that is one place in this game where it is possible to accidentally cheat because you forgot that your role changed.
Well, and I often cheated at the very beginning because my card was reversed. And so they have an arrow on it pointing north, but mine had gotten flipped around when it was passed to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that. And so I'm like, oh, I'll push it that way. And Charlie was like, no, that's mine. I'm like, oh, sorry.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is nice that they do that, although at the same time, I can see an argument for not doing that in order to make sure that people get used to their roles and don't make mistakes.
And if they were getting more specific and more complex with those asymmetric rules, I wouldn't want to flip them around.
Yeah.
But when it's something like move left or move south, I could easily, especially if you have more players, then I think that's really interesting because you only have the one movement you can do. And then if you do it and someone says, hey, that was mine, like, oh, shoot, sorry.
Yeah.
Although you're not supposed to talk.
It would be interesting to play with more players because I think you'd have this feeling of if you're hammer, everything is a nail.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
I should just always move down whenever I can.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, oh, no, we didn't really need that
we didn't
person to
want to
go
move down.
down.
Oh, we just put that guy on the wrong spot that he didn't want.
Yeah.
Well, I can teleport. Let's just keep teleporting.
Yeah, just
That was what I was thinking.
which is fun because there's always I like the arc of the game too because at the beginning it does feel like, oh yeah, we just want to keep it moving to the most obvious spot.
Explore more. Yeah.
But as we went along and we started to get more strategy, I noticed we actually got locked up a little more because they're like, well, we could push them that way, but there's not a real reason to go that way with this color.
Because they literally don't have anything they can explore. There's nothing for them in this room.
Yeah.
They should just leave.
Yeah. So I like that our AP level increased as we played
we
try to optimize, but we just slowed
went
down.
right through those tutorials, punched them right out, and then that last one, we failed miserably.
Which I'm glad. I like in a co-op when you actually fail and lose.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tension, though, with that timer. I was surprised how much that created.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the timer worked quite well.
Yeah. I'm not always a fan of stand timers, which I don't need to say that right now. I'll say that later. But but for games like this and for real-time games, I think stand timers are actually really great.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good things they can do for those games.
Yeah.
My takeaway, I think, is as I was thinking about this as we played, and when you flip the timer and you're allowed to talk, I was thinking, what is the value of our time talking versus actually doing?
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting because we definitely spent time to just talk things through.
Yeah.
But meanwhile,
Somewhat
the
to our
time's ticking
detriment.
down.
Right.
So we could have been moving, but I always felt like it was useful to spend at least 20 seconds to talk.
Well, and you can just shut everyone up by all right, let's do it.
We're moving.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I did that a few times.
Yeah. No, that's... Yeah,
but it's like and we talked about this in another series, maybe about Captain Sonar, where it's real time for parts, and then we take a break
respites.
and analyze. I guess we talked about that in our video game series.
Except it was still real time during the break.
It was still real time, but it felt like a break, right?
Yeah, that is really interesting. We value... I mean, thinking about it, on the last game we ran out of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did always feel like it was worth it to talk about stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though we were using up extremely valuable time that we could have been using to get people places.
Well, I think we had a false sense of security because we always could go on a time refresh space. And then
we lost it.
I realized,
them.
we're out of them completely because all the tiles are gone. Yeah.
I really appreciate having the attention as a resource in games like this, where you have to think about the cost of how many things you actually have going on that everyone has to pay attention to. Because for each character, they have an item they're picking up and an exit they're going towards, and a different mechanic that character can engage with specifically. And so, when you think about that, that's 3 things times 4. That's 12 different things along with a timer.
Yeah.
So, if you have 8 people, maybe you could delegate it, but since everyone has to be almost involved in different movements and things, you kind of can't delegate it.
Right. You can't say you're in charge of the barbarian because you're not in charge of the barbarian. You're in charge of moving north.
Right.
And sometimes the barbarian wants to move north, but sometimes they want to move in other directions as well.
Most of the time, they don't want to move north.
Yeah.
It's really interesting having that kind of like varied field of focus where, and just like, in the first game, Dutch Blitz, you have all of these different things that you're paying attention to. But obviously in that one, you have as you get more Dutch piles in the middle, that obviously expands how much you're paying attention to. So yeah, I think with this, just like that, you're having more squares, more tiles, more things where things could potentially go. And yeah, it's just really interesting.
More maze to look at.
Yep.
Where you have to visually go through the path. There's some of the funniest moments are when we didn't realize there wasn't a connection.
There wasn't a connection.
And we actually got stuck in the maze.
Yeah. Because I put it in the wrong spot.
Well,
I'm going to own up to that one because I was like, there's a spot there. I'll just put it there. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And it looked like there's a perfect place for this guy to go. It was the opposite of perfect.
Yeah.
While we're trying to escape.
So, I think my takeaway is in a co-op game, you co-op real time or otherwise, giving each player, as we talked about a little bit, giving each player something that not only is unique to them, but is uniquely necessary, something that only they can do and which they must do for the team to win, is a really great way to make everybody feel crucial to
as part of the work.
Yeah, to the team's success.
Yeah.
So just like as a general takeaway for co-op games, gives everybody something that only they can do and that is necessary for the success of the team.
Yeah.
And to take on to that, I think the do something token is real fun because and especially in a even more than 3-player game where you're passing that thing around a ton and the spotlight's on you, which is stressful but also kind of fun. It's like, ooh, now I got to figure out what are they talking about.
And to be fair, there's only 4 tokens you can look at. Really, you're only looking at the 4 characters. But then, what do those characters need to do, and what is your ability, and how do those two interact with each other with the board? It's like, oh god, what am I supposed to do? Especially if you're like the teleporter. Oh man, so many things that could happen with that. Or if you have teleport and move a direction. Yeah, you have a little bit of a panic attack, which is a good thing in real-time games, I think. Because that's what you want. You want that tension.
Yeah. What's your takeaway?
Oh, okay,
Trevor?
great. So I think for especially co-op games, you really want to have some kind of parallel rules for different things. So like I really like how all of the 4 characters are doing the same thing. Right, the core objective is all the same, but then adding a little twist to each one makes it more interesting, and it really kind of peppers it with just a little bit of interest and kind of unique things that the characters can do. Now, those are the characters and not the players, and so the players all have to keep all abilities in mind. But since you have a lot of parallel abilities, you don't actually have to think of new things for each character except for that one unique ability.
You understand what they can do because you understand what the other character can do.
Exactly. You're not creating a lot of complexity for each character. Each one doesn't have like a lot of unique abilities that they can do. Right. But having that one unique little thing, it's a little bit more pandemic in that case, where it's like they just have a little unique twist on their character compared to the others. And I think that's really nice to have for co-ops like this.
Yeah. Yeah, or like in Root, for example, even though that's not co-op, just how factions are different, but with some shared mechanics.
Yeah, exactly.
In contrast to, say, Vast.
And I guess that's more of an asymmetric idea, but like when you're having this level of real time and needing to pay attention to things, you want a lot of parallel things going on so that you don't have a lot more cerebral work.
Yeah, and this is definitely an asymmetric game.
Yeah, strangely enough. I did not expect that when I was going to start playing it, which is awesome.
Cool. With that, I think that wraps up Magic Maze. And tune in next time when we talk about skyrockets.
Hey, thanks for listening to The Tabletop Takeaway. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. So please tell your friends, and visit our website at thetabletoptakeaway.com, where you can suggest games and mechanics for us to cover next on the show.